Welcome back to the Teradek booth at NAB 2014. Our next panel is going to be a really interesting one, certainly for me, because I don't know too much about this subject, so I'm going to ask a lot of questions and hope my experts here can answer them. It's all going to be about drones and the professional usage of drones. What can people who are looking to make their living out of drones do to protect themselves in the future, to learn more, and also how can people using it for journalistic purposes avoid getting into trouble. And to talk about that, I've got people who are actually trying to sell us products, and I've got some people who are using the products. So on my left is Drew James from Defy, who make, for those of you who people don't know, make gimbals, brushless gimbal products and drone products,
sure.
and actually are filmmakers too. So you actually have flown these things all over the place and have some idea about where you can and can't do things and what you can and can't do with them.
That's right.
Confusingly, next to Drew is Drew. Drew from Wild Rabbit
Productions, correct.
Wild Rabbit Productions,
yes.
Who has been working very recently with drones for major networks, or certainly a major network, and we'll talk about that in a minute, and what that experience is like, and again, what that has required you to do professionally to do that to the standard, which is great. And then next to him, from the newsshooter.com team, is Scott Carlins. Now, Scott is a shooter. He does an awful lot of CSI work, but he also flies drones, so he knows a thing or two about that, and he'll hopefully be asking a few pertinent questions because I don't know too much about the subject. And
glad to help out.
On the end is our producer for the show, it's Rachel Harvey. She's come from Beijing with me. She's
never flown a drone.
Never flown a drone.
But are we talking about drones or clones?
And is also
I'm
here
not
to
sure.
ask intelligent questions based on the fact that she has in the past worked as a correspondent and a producer for the BBC. So as we see these drones becoming, it seems omnipresent everywhere now. It seems like you can't go to a big event without seeing drone footage. What should people be thinking about? What are the major things? Let's start with the legalities. Legally, in the US, because that's where we are now, what can you do, or what should you do to be up in the air over a major event? Let's start with second Drew.
All right. Well, I mean, first of all, the main thing that we do is we just try to be as safe as we possibly can at all times. That's our number one concern in any situation. And secondly, you know, we're fully insured, liability, as well as property damage. And you know, we do what we do extremely professionally, and we just make sure that no one is put at risk. And we have pre-planned flight paths at all times when we are flying in live events, and if there's any situation that we deem unsafe, we bring it down until.
And are these pre-planned flight paths something you have to clear with anybody, or is this just for your own sort of state of mind?
That is just situational. The last event that we did, we flew with Fox Sports Ohio at the Cincinnati Reds opening game, and we were given predetermined flight paths over buildings only, never over people, and on closed streets as well.
Actually, you know, before we go any further, why don't we take a look at that? If we can tee up the Fox Sports video, you can see exactly what we're talking about, exactly the sort of application that we're seeing more and more. Mm-hmm. Actually, I think we have a slight technical problem, but we'll come to that in just one second. Insurance? Is it easy to get insurance here in the United States?
There are people that are insuring this technology. You know, it's a business like anything. So insurance companies are definitely interested in getting into this market. You know, we're fortunate enough that through one of my partners, he has great production insurance, and we were able to add on an aerial plan for Wild Rabbit as well, and so that's been very fortunate for us.
Well, I'm guessing you need a fair-sized amount of liability, you know, especially
Correct.
if you're going over. How many people were you flying over at that thing?
I mean, there's probably 40,000 people at that event. Yeah. So I mean, we have a very sizable insurance policy, but I mean, honestly, these things weigh about 20 pounds max, so the amount of damage that could potentially be done is very minimal. Compared to, let's say, a real helicopter or any other sort of large aircraft.
First, Drew, I can turn to you for 1 second. What do you do for things like insurance? Oh, hang on a minute. Sorry. technical interruption. We have the video. Okay, let's just watch what we're talking about here. Drew, do you want to talk about what are we seeing here?
A lot of this is opening day before the crowd showed up. We were located on the roof of the Hall of Fame building there in Cincinnati, and we were just getting live footage for their pregame show. And we did fly some during the game, but the winds actually did end up being a little too high for us to fly. So we.
But yeah, I mean, this is what we're talking about here: large
Correct.
crowds, and you're flying right over the top of them.
Correct. We're actually flying over a building here, so we're not actually over any people whatsoever.
So you're zoomed in.
Yeah, we're zoomed in here.
Okay.
So we're flying over the main building that was our designated area. And then on this shot, we're flying over a closed street.
So the safety constraint is that you could not fly directly over the crowds
Correct.
if you'd wanted to. Okay.
Correct.
So no sweeping through the crowds and they
No
can see the
sweeping,
drone there.
exactly.
None of that. Okay.
None of that.
Right.
And
the-
so this is for Fox. How much say over what you're doing are they? Are they controlling everything you do? And how concerned are they about the safety of this?
They were obviously extremely concerned about safety. It is such a new thing. They're very excited about it, which most people are. So we're the first drone company to do live broadcasts with Fox Sports. So that was a great opportunity for us. But we did put a lot of groundwork in to make sure that everything was set up properly, and that their legal team was satisfied with every single aspect of what we were doing.
I mean, let's turn to Scott for a second. I guess the argument goes something like this. Yeah, okay, it's potentially dangerous to fly a quadcopter, but then it's also potentially dangerous to fly a helicopter or fixed-wing aircraft over the same event, and that's what news broadcasters and sports broadcasters have traditionally done.
Exactly.
Would you say that's the case in your
Yeah,
experience?
definitely. I mean, my area is a little different. I work for a forensic engineering firm, so all the work I do is in a very controlled, always closed environment. So I'm working with explosion scenes, train crashes, plane crashes, things like that, and getting aerial video, aerial photography. So the scene's already closed, locked down by police or locked down by NTSB or some other federal entity. So I've got complete freedom to fly just within that restricted
That's
area.
kind of interesting. So your safety issues is completely the reverse. That the reason
Yes.
they're sending the drone in is to protect the safety of people outside the area.
Right.
Whereas
Well,
with a commercial shoot, it's you're protecting the people inside the area by having the drone outside.
Right. I mean, I'm trying to capture the scene as it is before they start doing cleanup, so I have scene preservation. Exactly what it looked like from the air, where a different perspective that traditional photography can't get by walking around on the ground, and being able to fly over a scene that might be dangerous for people to walk into. I can fly over and get shots and look at detail that they can assess, and then figure out how they're going to get in, how they're going to clean up, and work on safety issues from there. So totally different industry, but utilizing the same technology.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't know, how many hours have you all clocked? How many hours have you clocked?
Hours
up
of flying, 5 years out, twice a week.
Okay. Drew?
Over the last 2 years on multi-rotor aircrafts, I've logged about 800 hours over the last 2 years, constantly flying various sizes.
I was going to ask you as well.
Yeah, well, my time has been probably over the last 3 years, twice a week at least. I just taking up flying. So.
Okay, so you're all extremely experienced flyers, certainly compared to a lot of people out there who are getting into it. Do you think it's a good idea that there are people who are flying, let's say, they're DJI systems and small quads of that ilk, trying to do stuff which looks impressive. Should they be doing it in that kind of environment that we've just seen?
I think it depends on the situation. I mean, if they're in a controlled area in their own backyard or in somebody's backyard filming something, doing real estate, things like that.
But over a baseball stadium.
Yeah,
full of
certainly.
fans?
I mean, there's lots of risk, and you have to have for me, and I'm sure for these guys too. There's an immense pre-flight list. There's lots of checks and balances. If anything is not right on the aircraft, it doesn't fly, and you pick up a backup unit, or you just don't fly that day. I mean, there's
a big part about that too. When I started, the technology has come a long way.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
When you first got into it back in the day, you're lucky just to keep it in front of you. And now, like, you basically fly themselves. So that has, I think, helped a lot too in the industry, to where now it's a lot easier to fly. So I wouldn't say jump into a baseball stadium and start flying right away, but it's actually easier to get started now than when it was just a couple of years ago.
Exactly. I mean, my systems have double redundancy on a backup. If the battery runs low, it flies back to home base. If I
it's the
lose
stuff we're seeing
communication
now,
with my
more and more
transmitter, it flies back to home.
backup systems that get you out of jail, so should things start failing.
Right.
I mean, you've all got fairly modern quads or octos. What other sort of fail-safes are there? Maybe second Drew, you can talk about that.
I mean, essentially what he was just talking about. If we lose any sort of radio link, it'll return to home and land. We run redundancy in our battery systems, as well as on our radio systems as well. So it's we make sure that all those systems are in place, and we do our pre-flight checks. If there's anything that isn't working on our systems and we don't fly that day, or we use a backup. So, with anything like this, whether you're flying drones or you're using a crane on set, it just takes common sense with what you're doing. So I would not advise someone to pick up a DJI and then go fly over a large crowd, which is actually something that we ran into at the Ohio job.
What did you run into? Somebody actually getting in your way? Or?
We were flying and somebody came bombing in over the crowd with a small DJI quad. They were flying FPV, I believe, from over the other side of the river. And so we had to ground our operation for an hour until they cleared out. And we made sure that they weren't coming back. And it's situations like that where that could come back and look really bad on us if something happened with them, they messed up.
And I assume you had a spotter that saw it and said, "Hey, there's somebody in our airspace."
Exactly.
Well, that's important actually. You said you assume you had a spotter. Is that something that you all do? You have a second person keeping a second pair of eyes on the drone. Should the operator keel over with a heart attack or too much sunburn or something like that?
Well, yeah, that would be that was only once that happened, but.
You lost how many people that time?
They're okay. For our application, it's actually really unique because we have a hand in manufacturing and customization, but we also have a hand in a large part of what we do is in agriculture. So it's not so much spotting and looking out for these areas, it's looking out for telephone poles. We're in thousands of acres flying fixed wing as well as multi-rotors. And we're actually collecting data from the crops using thermal and infrared cameras, collecting infrared data from the crops to nitrogen levels, nitrogen deficiency, water deficiency over crops, and bring that data back. So it's a totally different way of flying, but the same rules apply. I mean, the same thing applies, and I think learning that process of being able to get something up in the air and actually fly it confidently is really important. And now there's a difference between actually manually flying it versus computerized flight plans, which are two totally different ways of flying.
Yeah, you can practically now map out your route on some systems on an iPad. You want to go from here to here to here.
Right.
You want to be roughly at this altitude, press go, and off it goes.
Yeah.
Right.
Fully autonomous flight is definitely the way to go. It's much safer. And the aircraft is going to have, aircrafts are coming out with sense and avoid now, so if something else comes into airspace, it can move over and stay out of harm's way of something coming in.
But so essentially at the moment things are pretty unlegislated. Certainly in the United States. I think that's different in parts of Europe.
Yes. Very gray area here in the States right now.
Do you actually think the industry would benefit from legislation of the correct variety? Or should it just stay the way it is?
I think that everything has to be looked at and measured because if everybody had the right equipment to go out and fly whatever, I mean, obviously it goes with checks and balances. What I think is really important is that there's a way that people can fly commercially once approved in some way. Maybe it's flight school, maybe it's proving that you are a good pilot and you know your checklist, you know how to be safe. I think that will happen. Right now we're all kind of in this gray area of not knowing. We're all trying to play it safe, but we don't really know the rules just yet. But I do think knowing that there's a safe way to take an industrial grade multi-rotor or fixed wing aircraft and actually go and make money with it, I definitely think there's going to be some checks and balances there that the government will have in place for sure.
But licensing rather than legislation then? Just making sure everyone has a certification to say, yes, I'm good to go.
I think that's the direction it's heading.
Because that would make more sense then to make it global. Sure. The problem at the moment is, as Dan was suggesting, you've got different legislation in different countries, some parts of the world where, frankly, there isn't much legislation, and if there is, it's probably not going to be enforced very strictly.
And they're all trying to figure it out with each other.
Yeah, and how do you enforce legislation on the fly, excuse the pun, but if someone decides to put up a drone and you're in the middle of a political protest, because I'm coming at this very much with it's beginning to be used, this technology now, in a breaking news situation. Everything you've been talking about is a lot of planning. It's a lot of careful consideration, protocols, training. If you start reacting to a breaking news situation, A, it's very unpredictable. If you've got a political protest, very unpredictable. How do you plan that? How can you have a flight plan when you've got a moving demonstration? They were used very effectively in Thailand for political demonstrations. You really got a sense of the size of the demonstration. Used again after Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines. Again, fantastic sense of the scale of the disaster. But for a breaking news situation, how do you do the pre-planning?
You can totally see why broadcasters would want
Absolutely.
that footage.
It looks really effective.
It
Highly
a
sought
completely
after.
different perspective. You know, when you've got a disaster like a typhoon, a hurricane, an earthquake, it's probably the single best way to get a handle on what that looks like. You just stick a drone up.
And it's cheaper than the traditional helicopter shot.
Well, and you can put it where you can't put a traditional helicopter a lot of times.
And get it up faster.
Definitely get it up faster. Yeah, get it back faster too.
Right.
Drew, do you think that in the US there should be legislation?
I do think that there should be some sort of system in place for us to do what we do, and to have some sort of legislation put in place so that essentially
licensing.
Yeah. What I just want to be able to use these tools creatively and offer a service that somebody wants. So we have a product and people want it, and I want to be able to offer it to them. And we just try to operate as safe as we
And how about for breaking news? I mean, you've used it very effectively at a large-scale event, but it was a pre-planned event.
Exactly.
You could do all that stuff. Would your company consider doing? Say there was a small earthquake in, God forbid, in San Francisco. Would you, if Fox rang and said, "Can you get us a drone? We're desperate. We want that footage." Would you do it?
We actually haven't really thought about that. We've mainly been focused on commercial work. That's where all of our passions lie in our company. We are all creatives. We have creative backgrounds, and that's what our main focus is. The Fox event, doing live broadcasts, that was a first for us. It was a great event.
I could really see it catching on in sports events.
Yeah,
I mean, the appeal is so obvious. For
Drew,
sports
do you have customers that you know of that are basically looking to do that, to be on top of a big news story with a drone?
Absolutely. Yeah, it ranges
I don't
from...
naming. Well, you can name them if they're, I don't know.
Well, I think the customer really, the range is all over the board. You've got people that have never flown in their life and willing to spend whatever it takes to make it fly. But you've got guys that are really well experienced that really want to collect data or go after scientific and instruments from colleges and universities. And then you got filmmakers. And so I think it's really finding out what people really want to use it. It's an instrument. It's not a toy. It's not a hobby, right? It's an instrument that's meant to go out and do a job. And so we approach it, and I think all of us here approach it as a very commercialized application to do a job very well. And so depending on who the customer is that's wanting to modify it or purchase it, you've got to find out what they're really going to use it for and help make sure that it's perfect for their opportunity. It's safe, it's going to do the job correctly.
Let's talk a little bit about manufacturing, because we've got drones in front of us. You both work with drones. Are all drones created equal, especially for this kind of mission critical application?
It's like saying all cars are created equal.
Of course they are. They all have four wheels.
For the most part, yeah. No, there's many factors that go into it, and I guess you also manufacture a lot of your own parts too. I mean, or do you guys do much of that?
We essentially partner with companies that we can build specific applications for what we need. This drone right here, we're debuting it here at NAB. We worked with Allied Drones to build this specifically to suit our needs. So essentially, with this rig, we minimized all points of failure. So instead of having 16 screws for each boom, we have one military grade quick release clamp. So we're minimizing all those points of failure, which makes it a much safer application for us, as well as it makes it really easy to pack up, transport, and reassemble.
That's a great point, and I think it's we're going to have to wrap up very shortly. But I think as we finish, it's worth telling everybody who's watching, anybody certainly on the news side or the event side, documentary side, who's looking to get into this, that they need to be thinking about the safety aspects of what they're doing, and the technology, and not just walking out and buying their first $9.99 drone that they see in Walmart and thinking this is going to be okay to stick it. Well, not knowing. Maybe $399.99 drone that they see in Walmart. So one last thought from each of you on the panel. Where do you think we're going? Are we going? Is this the future for documentary makers and journalists? And
it's not going away. I think it's getting better. Technology is getting better. It's getting easier to fly, and I think that will ultimately make it safer to fly. So I think it's only going to get better. I think we're at the beginning. Remember 2 years ago at NAB, there wasn't a lot of exposure. I mean, look at how far we've gone in 2 years. So I think the future is wide open. Sky's the limit. That's my cheesy input there.
Drew?
No, it absolutely is the future, not just creatively, but in so many different other applications. So really excited to be a part of this industry and just see where it is going to go. In the last year that I've been doing this, it has grown leaps and bounds. So.
Okay, I'm going to have to wrap it up right here. Thank you very much, all of you, for discussing this. I wish we had much longer to. It's a very big subject. It's obviously a very current subject. We will try and cover drones a little bit more from now on newsshooter.com. And thank you once again for joining us. Now, if you would like to stay tuned, after a short break, I will be broadcasting from the Atomos booth. So stay with us, back after a short break.